What's up, y'all? I hope y'all having a good night. We have a special guest here tonight. He is my uncle, and he's also the owner of Sydney and Solomon Dogs, a food truck in Carbondale, Illinois. So if you're in that area, you might want to go by and take a look at that and check that out. They got some good food over there. I had him come up tonight because he has a lot of good knowledge to give, a lot of good info to give. He's been through a lot of things. He's well educated on a lot of things, and he has a lot of great input. So let's give him a round of applause. So yeah, man. We most definitely glad to have you up here tonight. So let's start from the beginning. Let's kind of talk about your childhood and what molded you, to be who you are today.
Childhood, huh? We going all the way back there.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you good.
Okay. Shit, man. Let me see. Hold on. I'm try to make sure I can keep facing this camera. Childhood, yeah, man. Well, I grew up in Pulaski, Pulaski, Illinois. For anybody that know Pulaski, it's a small rural town in southern Illinois. Um,
Also known as P Town. Yeah.
Also known as P Town, 16 miles north of Cairo, Illinois. It's actually pronounced Cairo, but we say Cairo. But
Right, right.
Cairo, 60 miles north of Cairo, in the area, in the area of the country they call Little Egypt. That also has significance. So Pulaski is a small rural farm town. So we grew up basically on the farm. Our granddad, he was a farmer. Aunties and grandmas, they was farming, worked the land, livestock, chickens, cows. Grandpa raised the cows, and our auntie, she raised chickens. So, we grew up, going down there getting them brown eggs.
Yeah, right, right.
Daddy used to be like, go down to Yankee Seal House and go get a dozen eggs. So, we grew up on the land and, grew up in a small rural farm community. We never liked it. And I think we didn't like it because at the time we was coming up, we had TV. We had TV in the house. And so when you got TV, you got a broader view of the world now. TV has a way of glamorizing everything and making you and creating desires in you that you excuse me, creating desires in you that you would probably wouldn't even normally have if you wouldn't even see them. So we grew up seeing things on TV and wanting to go other places. And so the farm and the rural community we grew up in just seemed real boring. But
Right. Now look at us. We kind of looking at it now like, man, we probably need to get back to it.
yeah, we understand now that granddaddy and them and that they understood. They had a whole lot of wisdom. They understood the foundation of all wealth was is land. They understood that the foundation of all freedom is land. And you have to have land in order to be free. Land is where everything comes from. Land is where everything is produced from. Your wood, your clay land to make brick. Your timber to make houses, so on and so forth. Everything we got coming from the land. All the
Right.
metals that you know mold and smelt together to make any industrial equipment. All of it comes from the land, and every free people understood that in order to be truly free, you had to have land because you had to be able to provide food, clothing, and shelter, and the basic necessities of life for yourself. That all come from the land. So, but we didn't understand that, and then we didn't understand um, a lot of the mechanisms that was at work to actually remove us from the land. So but we ain't far removed from it, and we getting back to it slowly but surely. So yeah, uh, growing up there, small rural town, so it ain't much going on. Um, it's not like growing up in a city where you got mass population and you have a lot of uncertainties about life. It's, you
Right,
know,
right,
you're dealing with danger and things, that can just randomly happen to you at particular times. So it's not like that. It's more of a safe haven. So we grew up like that. So we wasn't we wasn't as exposed to the world and all of that good stuff. But we wanted that exposure. So yeah, growing up there, um, growing up, in the two-parent household, which was pretty rare from a African American standpoint. We didn't realize that until you know we got out and about. Started to see how most black people live around the world. Most black people live in this country. Then we didn't begin to realize that uh, that wasn't the norm. So that's a basic foundation.
right. And then on top of that, as far as like having farmland and everything like that, a lot of black people in major cities, things like that, they're not exposed to that at all. They don't even know what that is. Having their own land and being able to pick and grow food.
Yeah.
So at an early age, it was a good thing. That you were able to be exposed to that. So
Yeah, it's some work, man. We hated it, man. You
man,
talking about
I know I did that work too.
talking about working in the fields, man. Oh man, hey, but you know, it's work, and a lot of us, I mean, heck, I was born in 1980, so you growing up in the 80s, and then coming of age in the 90s, to where you start, technology is moving fast, and you starting to see a lot more things on television. Back then, there wasn't no social media. We couldn't do this like this stuff right here.
Right,
This was
yeah.
that we what we seen on the Jetsons and cartoons, So here we are live and in living color, not doing this, but it wasn't none of this. So our exposure to the broader world was through television, uh, movies, and so that's what we wanted. Those were the desires that was created in us that was young and when we was young. So we didn't want to do all that hard physical labor.
Right, yeah. Yeah. That's some hard work. It's not no joke, man. If none of y'all never worked in the field, hey, that's a different type of work.
Yeah, it is. And but you learn to understand, and like I say, we know it now. We got to get back to it. We working really trying to scramble to get back to it now. You know. But so
Yeah.
yeah, so growing up there, and then we just grew up, and then this area of the country is pretty diverse in terms of you not just around a bunch of black people all the time. When we went to school, it's pretty diverse. You going to school, and it was mainly black and white. Out here in this area where it is, you didn't have an you don't have an influx of foreigners. From a lot of other countries like you have on the coastal states and coastal cities. So it's just mainly black and white. So you grew up around that, and growing up in the 80s, you still had uh, those remnants of overt racism around. White folks would call you a nigga, just right then and there, especially, in this area of the country, rural, toward the south, right on the Mason Dixon line. So you still had those remnants, and your parents still remember that stuff. So those was pretty fresh in your mind. So, but all in all, it was a peaceful existence. We grew up just like basically, most people grow up. Then you get to the age where you becoming a teenager and you want to experience a little bit more. You're a little bit more curious about the world. Old folks used to say you get to smelling yourself.
Right, yeah,
So
yeah.
you want a little bit more independence. Especially when you're young, especially when you're a young man. So, but yeah, that's more or less the background. I guess we can go deeper if you want it, but
Right,
that's the
yeah.
basic.
So say, as you getting older, um, what started to influence you more to like go the other way, and you kind of know what I mean by that, like as far as like that.
Well, I mean, when you're young, you curious about things, and so um, you're curious about how other people live. You're curious about why they live the way they live. You begin to hang with more with a group, or a diverse group of people. Like when you're young, you mainly in the house. You ain't outside doing anything. So as you say, as we like to say, at what age when you jumped off the porch, you know what I mean?
Right,
Basically, you
right,
stop being in the house all the time and you start hanging around with your friends and start hanging around with different people in the neighborhood, and you getting exposed to different ways of life, different viewpoints. Like we grew up, mom and them going to church, and so you pretty much probably thought everybody went to church till you came out the house and started, hanging with your friends a little bit, and you realize like, well, their parents don't go to church, so you figuring out like, man, why we got to go to church? I wish I had to go to church, and so you thinking they got it pretty good over there, and
right.
so you start running into people who ain't grew up in the church house, or who don't have a religious background or foundation, so you start just seeing how other people live, and when you're young, I guess in the teenage years, that looks like more of a freedom because you don't want them constraints on your life like that. Especially when you start to be a teenager, you want to you looking more for that independence. You don't want them constraints on your life like that. So you kind of like, okay, let me see what this is all about. So yeah, so I think I was about maybe about 12 when I jumped off the porch. As you said, I think that's probably one of the first times I stayed out after dark. Like, just being out somewhere doing my own thing. And remember
Right,
coming
right.
home and mom was like, where you been? I was like, nowhere. That's the patented answer. You know what I mean? Because yeah, we in plastic. We ain't nowhere.
Yeah, right.
Nowhere up the street, ain't nowhere. So
Hmm.
yeah, so I'm like, nowhere. And he was like, and I remember, being I guess I was in New Edition. I was in New Edition and hanging with some folks out there. And so New Edition was where a lot of folks, you had a lot of kids out there, back then. Now it's like a ghost town, but there's a bunch of kids out there, bunch of kids that was in the neighborhood we school with, so you start hanging with them more, you see them outside of school, you start seeing how they live, go over their house. So it's a little bit different. And then you start seeing people, that's just hanging out, just doing whatever. So, me, I'm like, okay, this is different, but this is a little bit more free. And I ain't got all these constraints on me. Like, ain't nobody telling me go to bed or this, that, and the third, or you for so yeah, start hanging out, start seeing that other side of life, and I'm like, shoot, I think I kind of like this a little bit more. I ain't got to follow all this, this is how I want to
Right,
live.
right, right. You getting older now. You get to get out more and things like that.
Yeah. So you like, man, this is how I want to live right here. So yeah, you get out a little bit more. You start seeing that. You start seeing different ways of life, and I don't know if that necessarily well, yeah, it's an influence on you, and it's a little different because it's different from how you grew up. So you in that phase where you experiencing that. I think I was about 14 when I had my first drink. When I had my first drink of alcohol back then. This is in 1994. So Gin and Juice was the popular song at
Right,
that
right,
time.
right.
Snoop Dogg. And so everybody, the Gin and Juice was the popular song, which is a whole story behind that. When we began to even understand the levels of how popular culture, mass media, has been so designed to veer you off at an early age. I mean, that was a deal struck by Death
Not, not,
Row and Seagram's Gin on even making that song and how it became popularized. But anyway, I remember that song come out and real popular at that time, and so people drinking gin and juice, So I'm
not.
over one of my partner's house in New Edition, and they drinking gin and juice, and so I'm drinking this stuff, and it tastes like some juice, and I'm like, man, this
Hmm.
ain't nothing right here. And my buddy, he looking at me, Pookie Luke. he looking at me like, all right, boy, he laughing at me, but I'm like, oh, this ain't nothing. I'm drinking. Next thing you know, I find myself, I'm in there wrestling with folks in the room, and then after that, I'm like, golly, man, I'm
Oh, the
dizzy.
gin done turned you up, huh? Turned you to a
I'm
whole
like,
different person.
I'm like, man, I'm like, man, I'm really drunk. And I remember my cousin, man, I remember Leslie. Leslie was over there at that particular time, right? And I'm like, man, I gotta go home. So I'm like trying to walk home, and Leslie like, boy, what's wrong with you? You drunk? I'm like, man, I'm all right. She's like, man, get in this. She's like, get in this car. Yeah, let me take you home. And so she took me down the street. And she dropped me off on the highway. And she's like, she's like, go ahead and get out the car because you ain't gonna have any else thinking you've been hanging with me. She's like, you ain't gonna have
Right.
any else thinking you've been hanging with me. And so go ahead, you can walk from here. So man, I walk to the house, man. I'm just staggering drunk, and I see some of my friends because we used to hang out there by so you know where the church is now. Across the
Mm-hmm.
street from the church, my partner and them Tremel and Keisha and them, they had the house out there, so that's where we was all at. Right there on the corner at that stop sign. Right before you get to 51, I think what is that, North Street? I don't know, but anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So they all out there, and my homegirl, she come up to me like, "Boy, what's wrong with you? You drunk?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is the first time I had never got drunk. I don't even know what's going on." So I done walked home, and now all of a sudden I done kind of calmed down, and I'm just hot, So I done got it there, got up
Mm-hmm.
under the fan, and next thing you know, I done threw up all on the floor. Mama coming there, boy, what's it? She hollered at me. She's like, Sullivan, Sullivan. I'm like, okay, I ain't responding. I'm like, she's like, you smell like you've been drinking Mad Dog. Mad Dog. You smell like you've been drinking Mad Dog. And I'm like, and I done threw up all on the floor. She didn't have to clean it all up. And I'm like, golly. And that was the first time I, got drunk. So, but
Mm-hmm.
after that day, I was like, man, I don't know if I want that again. But then you hanging with the people, and you like,
Right. Yep.
it
Yep.
was kind of fun though.
Yeah. Yeah. You know how that go.
It
Now
was
I have
kind of fun.
right. Right. Now I have a question regarding that because you kind of said this. The song Gin and Juice somewhat influenced it. And not too long ago, I did a live talking about this. To where in hip hop, this is a known fact. A big interview that actually came out, and they said that they had like some big secret meeting, and this was back in the early '90s, right?
Yeah, with
So they had
Crazy
a big
Bone.
secret. Yep. They had a secret meeting to basically use hip hop music to influence the youth
Yeah,
to do criminal activity, sell drugs,
yeah,
promote killing and murdering,
yeah, yeah,
to so they can kind of raise the prison population because they all invested in private prisons.
yeah,
So
yeah,
do you think that it is somewhat true, like
yeah.
that actually worked?
It's true. And,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, did it work? Shit, the proof is in the pudding.
Right,
You
right.
know what I mean? Hell yeah, it worked. I mean, because these social engineers, made up of sociologists, psychologists, and people in high levels of government that they study, and they've been studying this type of stuff. I think the thing is, so many of us underestimate the level of study that goes into uh, uh, controlling human behavior and the human mind, and the level of study that's done in these big institutions. These big institutions, these colleges, universities, these think tanks. The military. All of these things, man. I don't think we really realize that on the highest level that billions. I think we know that, and we understand that, but I don't think we really understand that not only is it studied, but it's applied, and um it's activated. It's practiced on us. On a day-to-day basis, and I don't think we realize the depth of it. Because they have a plan for society to move in a certain direction, so they need to use all type of institutions to do that. You know what I mean? But yeah, uh, we all heard about the secret meeting. Crazy Bone came out with that, and also, um, one of my brothers, Dr. Wesley. He really exposes that at that particular time when Gin and Juice came out, whereas Suge Knight was meeting with one of the executives of Secret of Gin, which was uh, it was Edgar Brofman's son, who actually which was in the and I'm it was one of the Brofmans. I don't know if it was Edgar Brofman and his dad was another name, but it was one of the Brofmans, and he do Seagram's Gin, big CEO on a bunch of stuff. But yeah, anyway, um, Suge Knight had a meeting with him and basically was like, hey, we want to have this song, because we want to push Seagram's Gin a little bit more, and what's it gonna cost? And so these deals is always being made, and so songs are being made to push this on the public. Future came out and he talked about how basically lyrics and a script was given to him to begin to push Percocets and Molly. And he got the song. He
Yeah,
became
yeah,
the
yeah.
drum major for Percocets and Molly. I mean, this stuff didn't just come out of nowhere that we start getting involved in this stuff, because when you're dealing with the music and we ingesting this, within our mind, and we, bobbing the head, so we coming into agreement with this mentally. Uh, yeah, man, this stuff, this is how it get pushed on us, and then they get a lot of rappers and celebrities. We see behind the scenes lifestyle of living their life, and it's glamorous to a lot of us. We want money, we want fame, recognition, whatever the case may be, because they use a natural desire within the human being to, misdirect our whole mind to driving us into a area of activity that's basically inherently destructive to us. But yeah, so Future come out on how this script was given to him, basically saying, this is what you rap about. Rap about this, and these folks get paid millions of dollars to do it, and he don't indulge in it. He don't do,
Right. He don't even do drugs. Yeah.
but you feel what I'm saying. But they understand that these individuals, these cultural influences are icons, that most of us are looking up to, and once we 12, 13, 14, those are the primary ages. And yeah, so they do this definitely, and so this is influencing a lot of our behavior. I remember one of our brothers, Dr. Wesley, says that it stands to reason that he who's ever in control of hip hop is basically in control of the contours of black life.
Yeah.
Now you got to think about that statement. If you in control of hip hop, you in control of the contours, meaning the rhythm and the flow and the pace and the direction in which we're gonna go of black life. Because think about how popular hip hop is to black people. And you think about 40, 50 million people in this country. So if you in control of hip hop, you in control of black life. I mean, think about it. You got to really wrap your mind around how serious of a statement that is, and how serious that is when you have so many of us going into this direction. And really never just getting woke up from it. So yeah, so that was a big influence. Uh, and it's a big influence today. It's a big influence on youth with all type of other.
Ah, yeah, yeah. Even today, especially with the whole drill movement and everything. At one point, the whole gangster rap and everything kind of died down for a little bit. But I say, around by like 2012 or so, when drill and stuff was really popping, and I mean it's still popular to this day. Not necessarily drill, but like just it's the same thing with hip hop. It's the same message. Murder, drugs, things like that. So it's more it didn't just influence your generation. It's still influencing generations till this day.
Yeah,
And me personally, I said this in one of my lives. To me, it's kind of similar to like the war on drugs, as far as like the tactics that they use, how they use the music to influence the kids, And then once you get the kids influence, they do criminal behavior to where they get locked up, and then you have single mother homes, and it's just like a vicious cycle, pretty much similar to the war on drugs.
Man, this thing is serious, man, and we don't come out of it long enough to really get a view of it. Like, a lot of times we not in a position to where we able to trick, where we able to really step back from it and actually put all the pieces together and seeing like, hold on, this has relationship to this, and this has relationship to this, and this has relationship to this, and these people over here doing this, why this is happening, why this is happening, and we start thinking that all of these things are separate. But when you begin to just kind of put it all together, it's like a puzzle, and you say, hold on, all of this thing is working toward this one particular aim, goal, and agenda. And when you begin to discover that, and you begin to discover how vast it is, then you say, it kind of shock you for a minute because you almost in disbelief because it goes against so many things that we brought up believing, that's put forth to us, about a lot of different things. And so you just really kind of have to be like, you have to begin, you start questioning a lot of things, you start questioning everything. And but yeah, just going back to uh that straying away, hip hop, popular culture, has a direct influence on that. And then, wanting to get out, begin to experience different things has a direct influence on that. And so you wind up getting yourself, caught up, as we like to say, in a trick bag.
Right,
You
right,
talked about the war on drugs, and this whole social policy, that was against us as a people. It was the plan was laid down in the Nixon era. The trap was sprung on us and put out there, and the bait was sprung on us in the Reagan era. And then by the time, Bill Clinton in the early 90s and all of these folks began to come in, then you had the dragnet sweeping us all up,
right,
sweeping us all up into the prison. You follow what I'm saying? So you can trace that thing back to where once you had the civil rights era, black nationalist movement, and our people beginning to question authority, question government, question their position in this country wholesale. Even the best of us, the most upstanding, good Negroes begin to say, hold on, this situation ain't right. Here you got us in, and then you had those massive, quote unquote rebellions or peaceful protests or whatever we want to call them. We basically was beginning to question authority wholesale at that particular time. Then, this is with Lyndon Baines Johnson, and then the Voting Rights Act, and then once like a lot of these concessions began to be made, you know, uh, the power structure went back into the lab, strategically and saying, okay, what do we need to do about this situation? And, we have to understand that when they confer together, this is a round table, and they have scientists, scholars, social scientists, engineers, people who dictate all of these policies, because the objective of the game is basically control. You know what I mean? And how do
right,
we bring this segment of the population back under control to where they don't begin to actually seek real freedom in terms of separation, nation building, petitioning for land and a state of their own, and how can we, because they understood and understand that we would have not only a justifiable gripe in petitioning for real nationhood, real state, real freedom, where we
right,
have
right,
our own land, our own state, our own military, our own government, where we actually a self-determined people. So they saying, well, how can we continue to roll them up into the American society and begin to continue to keep them as a second class, permanent underclass, consumer populace. And how can we keep this thing going? And so they strategize, and this whole war on drugs, it's so much. Um, I'm looking for this sister book, man. She lays it out real well. Here it is. She lays this out real well. The new
Was
Jim
that the new Jim Crow? Yeah,
Michelle.
I heard of that book,
Yeah,
man.
she lays it out real well in here, man. Like she put, she did some real good work on that because they revamped this whole thing, right? And so like I said, the strategy was laid in the Nixon era. The trap was sprung on us in the Reagan era, and then most of us got caught up in that dragnet. When Bill Clinton came, and so you had this whole thing, that was really being pushed by hip hop. I mean, you mentioned it with a meeting was with the hip hop executives and these people who own private prisons.
Right.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? That's real, man. And I don't, so many of us don't think that this power structure even are actually talking about stuff like that, but they are because when we deal with them, you know, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad says it like this: you can't fathom the depths of Satan because when you understand, what you actually dealing with. Hey man, when it says in the scriptures, he comes to kill, steal, and destroy. I don't think we really understand that in real time. We like have this imaginary spirit type of world playing out in our mind, and we're not looking at this thing in real time, how it's operating in contemporary levels of life, government, institutions, in every area of life that we involved in, food,
Oh
all of
yeah.
this stuff. So,
Hmm.
yeah, man, that has a tendency to put us all into that dragnet. And so, yeah, so once that end up happening, so you asked about earlier, when did you begin to go that other way and, begin to be off in the streets, it began to happen at that particular age, between age about 14 and about 21, because between about the age of 14 and 21, that is when I was, involved in the streets, out here selling drugs, using drugs, just being out here, no
Right.
aim,
Right.
no purpose, no direction. So between that particular time, that's when it happened. So at the age of 21 is when I caught uh, my first federal case, for drug trafficking, drug conspiracy, all of that stuff. So when I caught the federal case, this is when I got locked up, and so that was a catalyst. Yeah,
Right. Right. So and then also at that time, yeah, I know you was also like in the military as well. So
I was.
when when you got locked up, were you in the military or
No, so I went to. I almost forgot about it. I did. I went to the military. Well, because the thing was between probably about the age of 14 and 16, you have that period where you be out there in the world, seeing, different ways of life. But I think at that particular time, I could see within a couple of years that this thing ain't really going nowhere, and I don't really want to live like this. This ain't really what I want to be. So I decided actually to go to Job Corps. I did. I actually decided to go to Job Corps when I was 16, about 16, 17 years old, because when I was 16, I realized like this ain't really what I want to do for real, for real. Like I want
right,
to be a
right,
little bit more. Then if you grow up in how I say in the scriptures of the Bible, raise a child up in the way that it should go, and it won't depart. And there's a big truth to that, because if you train correctly, you may veer off, but if you shown something functional, then you say, I don't think I'm feeling this. So anyway, long story short, so when I was 16, I did go to Job Corps, and that was a big turning point in life too, because it's pretty much the first time I was away from home, far away. You know what I mean? But I always
right,
wanted that independence, so I was away from home, but it was boarding school. So, I mean, ain't like I'm not under some structure. But, I think I realized back then that this was a time that I could kind of, begin to start over, reinvent myself, and just be like, kind of leave a lot of the stuff that I was involved in at that particular time behind. And this is when I met my martial arts instructor, which had and has, a big influence on my life because he was just one of these individuals. Because I always wanted to do martial arts, even when I was younger. I was attempting to teach myself.
Right, right.
Watching my old Bruce Lee movies. Yeah, I remember. I think I was about 12 years old, man. I went to Walmart with Grandma Jewel. And this is, like I say, we 12. This is when you start first beginning to do all of this stuff. So I was shoplifting at the time, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, my auntie. Shout out to Aunt Sarah. But anyway, yeah, my auntie, man, we in Walmart in Anna, man. We stealing cassette tapes and all of this. And I see a bunch of Bruce Lee movies. I'm like, man, I want these. So I just stole the Bruce Lee movies, right? I just stole the Bruce Lee movies and I got them at home. And I used to be up and late at night, you know what I mean, watching these Bruce Lee movies, practicing these kicks and all of this stuff. So I was really always into that, always into that. And so when I went to Job Corps, and it was a guy that was actually teaching it. I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna start learning. So he used to be an instructor because he's from St. Louis, and he was an instructor in the St. Louis Job Corps. But now he has a school in Kansas City. I've been at this school almost 30 years. Still has. I seen him in 2020. Or was it the end of 2021? No, it was the end of 2021, I think. No, it was the end of 2020, end of 2020. It was getting ready to turn 2021. I ended up reconnecting with him and seeing him. But yeah, so he had a real big influence on my life, a real, a positive figure that, he was showing me some other things. I stayed in his office a lot. He schooled me a lot on a lot of things. He was my age that I am now, and I was about 16, 17. He was 41, 42. I was about 16, 17. So I learned a lot from him. So once I did come out of that, out of Job Corps, I had a kind of a different perspective, different view on things, but I ended up going back, getting involved in the streets again. I think about 18 at the time.
Right, right.
And I never forget it, when I did get out of Job Corps, they give me like a few $1,000s, like readjustment money. And I'm like, I done went and bought a pound of weed and
Mm-hmm.
bought some cocaine and bought a car. And I was just gonna do my thing. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
And
Uh-huh.
so I did that, man. And, that didn't last too long, man. I think, man, I got out in September, man, probably about a month or two, man. I didn't have a dime. I ain't had no money. I done just messed all the money off, basically just partying, man, and smoking some weed and making some money here and there, selling some weed and coke. But
Right.
but so shoot, at that particular time, uh uh, I had met my first daughter's mother, and shoot, I was about 19 at the time, 18, 19, and I'm like, you know what? I don't think I really want to do this. I don't think I really want to live like this. I come to that realization again, when I was younger, that I don't want to live like that no more. So I did. I decided to go to the military because, I didn't want to hang around Pulaski. I was living in Cairo at the time. I didn't want to hang around there. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go to the military. So I decided to go to the Marine Corps. And
Right. Now, how was that for you?
you know what? I I I kind of I did like the military. I kind of liked the Marine Corps because I always, I liked the physical activity. I always liked it, working out and stuff. I had just come from Job Corps to where I was always lifting weights and training martial arts and stuff like that. So that was a big thing. So it was like an easy transition for real.
Right,
Like, I'm
right.
like, okay, yeah, this is. It was institutional living. Like I went from one institution at boarding school to the other to the military. So I'm like, it was like really an easy transition, man. And structure and order, but you engage, and I've come to the realization that military training, uh, stuff like that. is really good for young men. That gives them a foundation and some level of discipline in life. And I'm not advocating going to the U.S. military, but join there for a while. Because we got the military training also. But uh, I've come to the realization that that's good for young men. Young men definitely need military training because we have to have outlets for that natural aggressive tendency within us. And if it's not channeled, and governments all around the world understand and know this. What I mean? That's why you have military, and that's why they always were recruiting young men at about 18, 19, because they understand during that particular period of time in your life, you have to be put in a structure, for a prolonged period of time to where certain levels of structure, order, and discipline is kind of forced on you. You know what I mean?
Right,
But
right,
it's a cohesive unit, so it's like you don't like it, but it's okay. Everybody's going through it, and then you begin to like it, and all governments around the world understand this. So yeah, that and most young men at that particular age, you probably need about 4, 5 good years to where you got a good foundation, and then you ready to come and try to figure out your way in life. And so yeah, but it was cool. I didn't catch my case when I was in the military. I ended up getting out of the military. I got out the military in 2001. I've always had a because it was always within me. When I'm involved in these institutions. It was always an undercurrent of this racism. Always wanted to treat you as less than. Always wanted to demean you in some type of way when you black and you male, and you begin to see how your counterparts are treated. Young white males, and then there's this culture that's in it that wants you to assimilate into that type of mindset, type of behavior, and begin to assimilate into so you can just navigate through it. And it's kind of like a subtle hostile territory. Nowadays, like in corporate America, they call it microaggression.
right. Yeah, yeah,
Always a
yeah,
nitpicking.
yeah, yeah.
When
Little small things.
always, and it's just, and I've always seen that. And even when I was young, I'm just like, you know what, these they on some BS. I know this. I may not can articulate it really well, but I know BS when I see it. Even young. I'm like, no,
Right, right.
this is some bullshit. And so, and hell, I've always had an issue with Uncle Sam. So me and Uncle Sam just didn't get along then. So I was like, you know what? I don't think this for me. And at that particular time, I was with my daughter's mother at the time. She really wasn't feeling the military. Because we young people, and she, young women, they just being young women. So I was like, you know what, yeah, get up out of this. I ain't,
Right, right.
I still like to smoke weed. I still like to be, then I end up getting what is it? I think I ended up getting a dirty UA. When I was in there, and they didn't want to try to kick me out. Usually, when because they understand when you come in, you coming in out the street, so they ain't
Right,
trying
right.
to kick you out. They want their time. They want their 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Nah, I ain't going. So I end up going AWOL. I just stopped showing up for formation, stopped going to work. And then, so they cut your paycheck off, and I'm just like, you know what? So they sent me to the brig, and I stayed in the brig about 30 days while they processed me out. So then I got processed out, and ended up moving to St. Louis, and then it was like, all right, here we go again. I'm back, aimless and purposeless. What I'm gonna do now?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, always been used to these institutions, and then end up getting my family out there in St. Louis, and we back in the streets again. And next thing you know, we end up catching a case. We caught a federal case. We was in Cairo, doing X, Y, and Z. So we caught a federal case, and that's when I was forced to sit for a nice little minute.
Yeah, well, was it like 7 years?
I received 120 months in federal prison, which is a 10-year sentence. Um, in federal prison, you do 85% of your time. So I end up having to do about, and within the prison, I end up doing like 7.5 years. they had the drug programs at that particular time where you can get a year off your sentence. I took the drug program, so I got that year off the sentence, and I ended up going to the halfway house up there in St. Louis, the one right there on Kings Highway in Cobrig, and I think it's still there. Uh, and so yeah, I was there, and so yeah, but yeah, but and within that period of 7 years, it was another transformation because I had 7 years where I'm in these streets, back and forth, always in the back of my mind, like, you know, you really don't want to be out here like this. You really need to be doing something better. Uh, and just having serious to where this type of lifestyle never flourished and prospered with me. I've never had much luck being involved in that, so it's just like, what, no, I don't. This ain't where I belong right here. So once I went to prison, then it's that period of, okay, now you have to figure out who you are. And the thing is, most folks, man, let me see what time. Yeah, most folks, and that's why I said earlier that most people, man, when you out here, you be out here in this world, you never really have a chance to be able to step back and look at it from a certain view. Malcolm X, he has said it like this. He said, two things can happen. You just cut off. Okay. I
Yeah,
remember
it was
Malcolm X, he
breaking
has
up.
said,
I think
you
it's
still on?
starting.
I see it
Can
shut off
you
for a
hear me?
minute, then it started back. Huh?
Yeah, it's kind of breaking up a little bit. Hold up. Try to come out and try to come back in if you can. Hold on, let's see. And shout out to everybody that's watching. I see y'all on Facebook. You having little technical difficulties. I know, yeah, it is getting good. It will start messing up right when it's getting good too. I'm just waiting for him to come back in and see. Okay, there you go.
Man, you know what?
All right, there we go.
I seen that thing where it said try again. I'm sitting here hitting my computer screen thinking it's my phone. I'm like, this ain't nothing happening. This ain't a phone. This is a computer.
Yeah, yeah. Thought it was touchscreen.
Yeah, man. I'm hitting my phone and stuff like that, man. I should have. Hold on for a minute, because I should have went and got me a coffee break while we was doing it. I'll be right back. Hold on.
All right. See who are watching on Facebook. We got a few people watching. Yeah, y'all go check out the YouTube channel. It'll be on a playback.
Say what?
I'll make sure I chop up some of these videos so y'all can take a look at them. I'm talking to the people that's watching on Facebook. We got a few people watching on Facebook.
Yeah, I think I seen it. All right. So I was gonna say Malcolm X said basically Malcolm X was like there's there's only two places you can be where you actually have time to kind of read, study, and reflect, right? He said one of them is college, the other one is prison. And
Right.
so yeah, doing that transition, because I remember going through this whole court thing, right? And you going through this whole court thing and you basically just being pushed through like just like another like okay, yeah, plead guilty, yeah, well, you'll get this much time, and you just kind of like, hold on, wait a minute, hold on, you ain't got no time to even wrap your mind around what's really even going on. You just know, okay, you didn't get caught, breaking the law, and these people caught you in this jail now, and now you in the hands of all of these, you know, people that's telling you, okay, we plead guilty, they'll give you this time, and and you got all these questions, but you really don't know what to even ask because you don't know the real questions that you even need to be asking because you don't know nothing about no legal system half the time. Like you just don't understand. Like, and then they talking about okay, 10 years, 20 years, all of this old stuff. You're like, hold on, wait a
Right.
minute, like what?
Yeah. Yeah. Numbers like that.
Like you ain't so you just being pushed through, how they say, you just being pushed through like another number, another body, just like okay, whatever, yeah, go. And I remember, it's funny, I was thinking about this the other night. I think I was driving. I be thinking when I drive all the time at work, and I was thinking like, I remember one time I tried to fire my lawyer when I was in court, right? And and at this particular time, like the judge wouldn't let me do it. And I just couldn't even understand. I'm like, you can't fire your lawyer. I'm like, hold on, what is this? I can't fire. Because I was like, I'm knowing, like, man, something ain't right about this whole process. And yeah, you gave me this
Right.
lawyer, and I ain't feeling this. Like, I'm just knowing something ain't right. Something ain't right. I don't know what it is, but I know something ain't right. So I'm trying to fire the lawyer. And like, well, no, you can't fire this lawyer. She's doing a good job, and blah, 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 and all this. So I'm just like, you just being pushed through the process. Like, okay, you push through the process. That's why, I compare it like a drag net. Like a drag net is basically, this net that you put on the bottom of the ocean or in the sea, and it's just meant to just catch a bunch of fish. And
So
so,
what specifically did your lawyer do to where you was like, man, I don't really want to rock with her like that.
man, it's just, I mean, it's like, listen, these lawyers, man, you catch a case, you get some kind of public defender. Listen, man, these lawyers are not there to help you. They're just not. I mean, it's just, that's a whole nother conversation because then I got to go into a whole nother thing. I
Right, right,
swear,
yeah,
they,
yeah, yeah.
they just not They're not there for you. It's a public defender. They there to defend the public. Like,
Right.
man, it's
Yeah.
just listen, just even thinking about that stuff now is starting to halfway make me upset, man, because it was like, nah, this you just know like this ain't right. I don't know what it is, but this whole thing is ain't even right that y'all
Right.
got going on here. What is this, right? So, you go through the process. They push you through the process. They put you in the slammer. So now you there, and now you around there with all these other people, right? You like, and you got to kind of figure this thing out in prison. Really, just wasn't no. It really wasn't no intimidating place to me. I don't, people got all these stories about prison and stuff like that. It's just, maybe it was the prison that I went to, but it just wasn't that. I mean, it really, like I say, coming from Job Corps, then going to the military, then going to prison, it was another institution to me. Like I
Right.
was really used to this since the time I was about 16 years old. So you mass feeding in the child hall. Everybody going to bed at a certain time. You got certain times where you can move, and it's a structured, ordered society, like the military. I mean, it's a little different, but it wasn't no much. It wasn't that much different. So I was like kind of used to it. So that didn't even bother me.
Right.
Like
Right.
I've been in institutions, by choice at that particular time before I went to prison. I've been in the type of institutional living, so that ain't bother me. But you running around and uh, yeah, you start, meeting and greeting, dealing with all these people. When you're in a federal prison, you around people from all over the country. You locked up with a lot of these guys from everywhere. Different cities all around the country. You got the urban black male here. And
Right.
so I
Right.
had a distinct experience, because I'm not, quote unquote in the urban area. Grew up in an area urban, I was from rural, so I had like I could see certain things, but you got this. So you around all of these individuals who grew up in these cities, and you begin to get a understanding, and you begin to get an understanding. You begin to get a picture of collective black life in the cities, in the inner cities. You begin to get this picture because you begin to observe these people. You begin to observe these men. You're like, why y'all think like that? Why you what? And you hear stories. You're like, why would you even think something like that? Or how did you get involved in this? Or how do you don't even see that this ain't that? Or but you begin to see certain. You begin to develop a picture of collective black life all over the country. Particularly
Right.
in
Right.
the cities, and particularly with black men. And you begin, and a narrative begins to appear, and you say, hold on, this is something that you like, we all similar in some type of way, and we all dealing with this issue. How did we all end up here? Like we all here. And this is just one prison. You got, hundreds of them, dozens of them, hundreds of them all across the country.
Right. Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
story. Because you can go to a state prison, it's pretty much the same story. It's a little bit different, but it ain't. But it's pretty much the same story. And so you begin to like question, like, how did this happen? How did this all come about? How did we end up here? Not necessarily your life, but you looking at the black people life and the brothers as a whole inside the inner city, brothers in the country, all over the country, and then you looking at black people all over the country. Then you got a small piece of your history, as far as, I mean, hell, 1980, I grow up, and so yo your conscious of history basically more or less is gonna go back to your parents and their life and how they live, because they're gonna tell you stories. You really, grandparents you can somewhat relate, but you really don't relate. And then you're looking at your history and where you are now. So your view of history is enlarged. So you really don't understand how the pieces have been put together on how we all got in this position, like this collective position.
Right.
So, and that was always a question in my mind, like, man, how did all of this stuff get built up like this? Like, how did this stuff all even come about? Like, I guess I've always been a question, I've always questioned, like, how did we get to this place? So, so history was always kind of a subject that I always read, because I've always wanted to know, like, how did this even come about? When did this start? Who built this? why is this name this? Who is this person? I'm always asking questions. Always, even if I don't ask them verbally, I'm asking them in my mind, like, how did this happen? Where did this come from? So
Right, right, and you have to.
yeah, so you finding yourself in this situation, you kind of you got questions, maybe not you maybe can't even verbalize them, but you got the questions. So as you begin to move around these particular individuals, within these jails, you in contact with the urban black male, particularly, within these prisons. And one thing that I began to see and discover and understand that, they had a different experience in life for how they grew up. But one of the main experiences and things that was more prevalent, within the inner cities that wasn't prevalent in these rural areas where we are is this black nationalist, black power movement, right? You
Right,
know, and I can distinctly remember when I was about 13 years old when the movie X came out, Malcolm X, and that was one of these movies that I looked at. I was like, yeah, and was kind of thinking in the back of my mind. I think if I was in prison, that's what I would do. Just saying that to myself, not even really consciously saying, just like, yeah, that's what I would do. And I didn't necessarily go to the prison looking to be like Malcolm X or any of that stuff, but I always had these questions like, hold on. So, being around a lot of these brothers, you begin to see the seeds and the remnants of this black nationalist movement that was never around in this part of the country, right? Like you never had, a big presence, well, I mean, I've heard that, you had a chapter of the Black Panther Party here in Carbondale at a particular time,
right, right,
how strong they were. And I don't know, and I heard they had some altercations, with the police at, at that particular time, but they was here. But you never really had that strong presence to where you grew up as a kid and you seen these brothers and they
yeah,
was,
yeah,
kicking the ballistics to you about certain things. So you didn't have that black nationalist movement out here. Uh, you didn't have the Nation of Islam out here. You didn't have the black nationalist movement on no level out here in these rural areas. But once you begin to interact with a lot of these, inner city urban brothers, who done grew up in that type of that environment, they've had more interactions with that. So with that came, some of the ideas, the philosophies, and the things that they begin to talk and teach, and certain things I had just never heard. But what we did grow up having, you had around this area, you had, gang affiliations. You had, GDs, vice lords, and a lot of the offshoots, folks, vice lords, whatever the case may be. But then as you begin to look at a lot of this stuff, you begin to see the seeds of where these organizations begin to grow from, where they stem from, and what was their purpose and whatever was their aim, and you begin to trace them back. So a lot of this understanding that I never even came in contact with when I was younger. I never even heard none of this stuff about. You had a movie about Malcolm X. I remember watching a movie about the Black Panthers when I was younger, but Hollywood always got their agendas. You never really get the real story. So you come around individuals who maybe grew up in them type of environments, who their people was associated with it, who they might have been associated with it, and there's a whole nother level of consciousness about Black life that me, I was never even aware of. You know what I mean? We grow up, especially out here in this area. You learn about Martin Luther King in school, and you learn
right,
about
yeah, yeah, the usual.
and all of the safe Negroes,
Right,
that
right,
that's safe, to white folks. So they'll teach you about them, but you don't hear nothing about Elijah Muhammad, Marcus Garvey, Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, uh, all of these individuals that you just don't even know about that had a strong influence on Black life and the consciousness where we are today, right? So I'm
right,
like,
right,
okay. So in me, I was never one to just accept anything. I just don't accept things. But like, and I'm always an individual. Like I can be by myself and I'll be fine with that. I'm more of an introvert, meaning like if I deal with people, I usually got a few circle of people I deal with. I don't just deal with like I'm not the big social animal, as you say, like that. I don't really like that type of environments like that. So I'm more comfortable with a few people, and I can just be somewhere by myself, or I'll just grab a book and just be by myself. But you always hear side conversation because when you're in these type of places, uh you can't get away from nobody. You're always around people.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
what I mean?
People everywhere.
You're always around somebody. But so I'll be somewhere. But I think when you go to the federal prison, when you go to prison, a lot of times, especially in the feds, you got to work a job. They make you work. You know, prisons legalized slavery, so that's a whole nother conversation in and of itself. But anyway, long story short, so I was working in the child hall, and that's usually where they're gonna put everybody in the kitchen, right? You
Right.
black people,
Right.
you're all in the kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm working in the child hall, and I think I was reading. I was doing something. I might have been sitting by myself, and I was just hearing like side conversation. And I don't even remember where what was being said to the degree, but I remember it was something being said, and I was like, damn, I never heard that like that before. And I don't know if they was talking about it in terms of religion or in terms of the black and white dynamic, because those conversations, go on all the time. And I was like, damn, you never heard that. And I'm like, that shit makes sense. That's real. And, then just among like other little things that would be talked about around me. And I'm like, damn, I ain't never
And
even heard that.
it
That
got to
makes
a
sense.
certain point to where you had to start engaging in some type of way.
Yeah, like, and I'd just be like, I'm kind of like more or less like a fly on the wall. Like I'm there just doing my own thing, but I'm listening.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard that. That shit makes sense. And then you go to interacting with people, and you talking, and and a lot of brothers, man. And when I was in there, you had a remnant. As like this thing, when you're dealing with the war on drugs and the dragnet was happening late '80s, early '90s, you begin to see that a lot of the brothers that was in there, you had this remnant of a lot of the old black nationalist movements. Uh, I remember listening to, I think it was one of Tupac's songs, and he said it like this in one of his lyrics, and it made sense. He said, it was a song, "So Many Tears," right? He said, back in elementary me, a crime misery. He said, but the phrase was, he said, left me alone. I grew up amongst a dying breed. Inside my mind didn't have a place to rest until I got that thug like tatted on my chest. You remember them lyrics? It was from that song, "So
Mm-hmm.
Many Tears," right? And I really, we young listening to this, but Tupac mother was a Black Panther, right? So
Right.
when he
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
"Left me alone, I grew up amongst a dying breed," right? When he was saying that, he come of age. Well, his mother was a Black Panther, but at this particular time, the Black Panthers, had been all but destroyed. I think Huey P. Newton ended up getting shots like in the early '80s, but
Yep. And then the other one, I think he got hooked on drugs, I think, something like
yeah,
that.
Huey P. Newton got hooked on drugs too.
Okay, okay, okay.
But it was, but this is Soledad Brothers. This book, it kind of highlights Soledad Brothers.
And it isn't
George
he?
Jackson, Jonathan Jackson. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I got
these
his
these
other
boys
book.
are beasts right here. But
Yeah, yeah.
anyway, um, but what he was saying in that particular time, that lyric was, this movement was on the decline. Counterintelligence program had begun to destroy this movement. Through J. Edgar Hoover. Uh, and so he coming of age where people are still talking black nationalism, but the movement had went on to the decline, and the mass rank and file followers of this particular movement, once these movements began to get destroyed, they didn't have a place to turn. But then, of course, COINTEL and the drug culture was prevalent in the 60s and the 70s. And of course, the stuff was being pushed on as heroin began to come in. They had the whole movie American Gangster. The government isn't complicit in that. It's warfare. But anyway, long story short, so at that particular time when these movements was being destroyed and the drug war was coming on, then all these brothers began to get shoved into prisons, right? So a lot of these brothers that was in these type of movements in the 60s and the 70s and growing up in these movements, these brothers was beginning to be shoved into prison. They was a little bit older at that particular time. And coming into prison at that particular time, like they still had a remnant of that culture. So the prisons at that particular time, they had like kind of structured the culture of prison to where it was more like kind of like a college. And you had a whole set of books that was always being passed around that, a lot of older folks were like, man, you should read this, read this, read this. And, a lot of them was looking at me because I was always kind of militant, and I always was the ones that was asking questions. It was like, I don't know, so they could see, and they'd be like, man, you should read this. You should read this. And I remember the first book I think I read that kind of really opened my eyes a lot. And I had just learned this a couple of days ago when I was watching one of the brothers' podcasts. Brother Joshua Muhammad, he got a podcast called The People Podcast, and he was interviewing Dr. Ali Muhammad, which was one of the national health ministers of the Nation of Islam. But long story short, first book I had read that really kind of sparked some things for me was like Miseducation of the Negro, Carter G. Woodson.
Yep, I remember you giving me that book actually.
That was a big one right there. I'm like, because he really began to draw this, and Carter G. Woodson was around, and he was a contemporary of like Marcus Garvey. What's the other boy? He was another Harvard graduate. W.E.B. Du Bois. He was a contemporary of them, so he was around at that particular time, right? And J.A. Waters was around, early 1920s and stuff like that. So I read that, and then I got a hold of a sociology book, because they had a college course there too. So you had a bunch of college textbooks, and I started reading the sociology book, and this was kind of opening my eyes on a certain lot of levels. So I'm like, damn, that shit makes sense. Like, you begin to start reading and studying and stuff, and then you get the book, you read it, and you start talking about it. I'm like, yeah, I read that, and blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah. And somebody like, well, read this, and then read this. And then, so, and I would like be going through them like, damn, because I had never heard none of this stuff. I don't know who none of these people is. I ain't never heard none of this stuff, but they had a major influence on Black people and Black life, right? So I'm like, damn, come on, I ain't never heard of these people, so I'm like, thinking about how I grew up, and, all of these people was around telling you stuff, and all these Black people, like, man, nobody never mentioned none of these people, right? So I feel like I think I was like feeling some type of way about that, like, man, because they really was dealing with, the Black struggle from a standpoint of, man, we need to build our own, we need to be independent. We so dependent on, white dominant society on so many different levels. And then, so many other, then they're talking about the faction of Black people who were created to get us involved more so in white society, to have more of a hand in assimilating us into this mass culture. And then you begin to see this dichotomy of Black people like, oh, that's why they talking about him but not him, and that's why they saying this, and that's why they saying this, and controlled opposition.
And if you look at it, ever since like desegregation and everything, us as Black people, we lost a lot of our wealth and resources since that time.
Which was
we don't
mainly
have
land, which we own. Black people, yeah, you're right. Black people own more land coming out of slavery than we actually do now as a collective. And the big push really of when most of us started moving to the north in these urban cities because they needed workers in these factories, right?
Right, right,
And there was a big push, and then a lot of us, we left the South because we didn't like how we was being treated by white folks, so we left the South, left the land, and that which was the design because they got the land now,
right. Yeah, yeah,
and we even became a industrial slave.
yeah.
We
Working
became,
12 hours a day in factories and stuff like that.
yeah, man. So yeah, we actually own more wealth. You know what I mean? But they done painted a picture in our mind of what wealth is and what wealth truly is. Even when you're dealing with the reparations movement, right? And they're talking about a check, and writing a check, giving you some damn Federal Reserve notes, which ain't number more debt, which they can value and devalue at will. That's not real money. You know what I mean? Real wealth, real money is real assets, land, gold, things that's tangible. I mean, because hell, I tell people all the time when we talk about stuff like this, like you can have $10 million in a bag, and I can have a bag of sandwiches, and you can lock us in a room for 10 days, and probably before them 10 days is out, I'm gonna have $1 million, and you're gonna trade me for these sandwiches that I got. Because at the end of the day, you're gonna want to sustain your life. So you can't eat that money. So things that's gonna help you sustain your life, which is land, because you can always grow you some food. And then at the same time, when you really even thinking about money, and money is just energy, which is a form of knowledge. Because if you can create, you can create money. I mean, you think about the people who created this technology that we own now, these phones, these computers, these smartphones, all of this stuff we use for modern economy. But if you created that because you understood the laws of, computer science, computer mechanics, you understood all the physical laws that make this stuff work, and you was able to build a mechanism to create this and produce it in mass, you created billions of dollars,
Right.
basically
Yeah,
from your
yeah,
mind.
yeah. For real.
So the knowledge is the money.
Right, yeah. When it comes to money, basically, your skills, your labor, that's what money is. And as far as like with the reparations thing, yeah, how I think we should get the reparations. I most definitely think it should just be more than money itself. We It should also be land included because even like at the beginning, they said we was owed 40 acres and a mule. So, compensation and some type of land, so we can also be able to build on that land as well.
Yeah. Because most time Elijah Muhammad, he talks and he says, as long as you got your mouth in the enemy's kitchen, you ain't never free. As
Right,
long as
right,
if you can't produce food, clothing, and shelter and the basic necessities of life for yourself, you're not free. If you always have to go to somebody else who's producing these things to trade Federal Reserve notes that they print for these basic necessities you need to live, electricity, a power grid, roads for your cars. Hell, can you even produce a car? Do you know how to build a car? A factory to produce millions of cars? Do you know how to do that? See, we not really looking at what it means to be free. What we have is license now. License is okay. Well, I can, go to the toilet with white folks. I can, sit at the lunchroom counter with them, and they just not gonna overtly call me a nigga, or I can, file a legitimate grievance, in some type of court system that he controls. That whenever they want to enforce their will, we got the power of the state, we got the power of the economy, we got the power of weapons, we got the power of a military, and we can always sanction things through state actors to just do what we want. See, you can't even enforce or protect yourself because you don't produce weapons.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, like one clip I remember. Killer Mike, man, he was talking, and he was talking about the rise and this mind and this consciousness of revolution, and people wanting to take up arms against the government and all of these things, right? And Killer Mike, he kind of like sobered a lot of people. I say, listen, man. He said, what do you do if you in here and you talking about we need to be armed and we need to be, do this and fight back, blah, blah, blah. He said, what do you do when the military locks down the city where there's no in and no out? You can't even get in. What do you do when they kill the power in all the city and they gonna loot and they loot the stores, and the store's gonna be looted ain't gonna be nothing in there within 3 or 4 days, within a week. You got no power, no water, no food, and then you talking about weapons. You don't have a munitions factory. You don't even have a hospital to where if you get wounded in battle, you got somebody that can come actually heal you up. You don't have anything. So you sitting here, you talking about this. I said you would be, he like you would be choked out in a week. You wouldn't last a week. So I mean, you got to really think about these things but you have to think about who's actually pushing that narrative out here, where you are inciting a lot of young Black men to take that line of approach, because we have to have a justifiable reason to slaughter you if we're going to slaughter you. So if we can put in social media, if we can put in movies in Hollywood to fan the flames of rebellion within you, because you got a just cause and you got the right to defend yourself, and what you're saying is right. But if we can fan that flame within you where you go out as a kamikaze and now you like a crash dummy, and we come to you with the military because we topple governments. You talking about got these guns that we produce and we make for you, but we over in whole countries toppling governments. We toppling empires, and you don't even have you got to really just think about it. And I ain't gonna go all into that, but so anyway, long story short, and I don't know if we got off topic or whatever the case may be, but
how much time you got left?
Yeah, I'm gonna run. We may do a part 2, man.
Yeah, we probably gonna have to do a part 2. I knew this was gonna happen. We was gonna start getting off topic again.
This is how we do it. We talk, but we go about 15 more minutes. I'm gonna run to Walmart. Walmart closed at 11. But so just that evolution of the consciousness of discovering all of these people, had these major influences on Black life, and then beginning to read and beginning to observe and beginning to look at how I grew up, how other people growing up, where we at as a condition of a whole on our people, and just really weighing like, man, okay, what do we need to be doing? What's the solution? Because we are here, and then, beginning to study history. Most time Elijah Muhammad says, history is the greatest subject. History is the subject greatest qualified to reward the researcher. And when I understand when he says that, he's basically saying that if you understand the trick that was played on you in the past, then you begin to understand the trick that's played on you in the future and in the present. And then when you begin to study history, and when you really begin to see this thing, you see, man, they ain't doing nothing new. Like all of this stuff is a recycle.
Just recycle it over and over again, just using different, like just different type of methods.
It's like the old saying, those who forget the past is doomed to repeat it. I mean, they got all these cliche sayings which have a lot of weight to them, because if you don't forgot, you don't even understand how things can be repackaged, because you're looking at form versus substance. You're looking at how this thing looks on the outside versus what this actually is in principle. I mean, prime example is slavery in the 13th Amendment. We got to understand this like this. The 13th Amendment didn't abolish slavery. It actually protected slavery. And this is why. Yeah, look at it. Think about it. And go and read it, because you can actually see it clear as day within the 13th Amendment that it said the wording is like this. And when you understand law, I highly Encourage everybody to get you one of these.
Black Law Dictionary. I'll check that out.
When you understand law, you understand that that words that they use and words that we use in everyday parlance don't have the same meaning as is when it's in law. And when you're
Mm.
dealing with the Constitution, you're dealing with a legal document. You're actually dealing with a trust document. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, long story short, 13th Amendment, it says um, involuntary, slavery and involuntary servitude is abolished. Hold on. I think I got a copy of the Constitution.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I do. Here it is right here. And this is one of them things. I don't know why. There it is, man.
Okay, okay. Constitution of the United States.
Yeah. This is one of these things. I'm gonna read it word for word. The 13th Amendment. Everybody know this. Most people know. I think most people who listen to you looking at this know this. Where is this damn thing? Hold on. You know what? Article. You know what? Come to think about it. Oh, here we go. Bam. The amendments. Because this is why the most honorable Elijah Muhammad called this tricknology. You know what I mean? Because when you're dealing with the enemy and you're dealing with his word games, it's a lot of tricks, and everything is hidden in these words. But it basically reads like this: neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdictions. Now, they got rid of the word slavery because I ain't gonna even go into that. That's a whole nother conversation. And
Right, but that's basically the prison industrial system, basically what we have today, right now.
yeah, but I'm gonna tell you a key word in this: involuntary servitude. See, they didn't say voluntary servitude.
Right, involuntary, yeah, right.
Because most of this stuff that we involved in, when you're dealing with this whole structure, and because now you're going to start dealing with the money, the nature of the money, what backs the money, but all of this is voluntary. We are actually in a voluntary servitude because we being contracted with on a day-to-day basis. And that's, I don't want to go off topic. Long story short, they revamped slavery, and as you were begin to start understanding all of this stuff and begin to ask these questions, and then you start to say, okay, this is something that needs to be looked into. You need, and there's a whole level of history and story that we've been locked out of when you deal with ancient history, modern history, so on and so, we don't be knowing, because we kind of used to ingesting what's given to us. Like, we just don't be knowing. So since we don't be knowing, we just like, well, this is it. We got people that live in different ways, and we just don't know. I mean, we ignorant. And the thing is, we willfully ignorant, which is the problem. Because we just kind of like, well, it don't matter because, long as we got, food, clothing, shelter, basic necessities, there ain't nobody just come bothering us. Slowly and surely, a lot of things can be put forth to us, and we gripe and we gonna complain about it for a couple of days, but then at the end we just like, well, big example is like things that's going on in schools, things that are being taught to our children, and most of us really in the Black community are fundamentally at disagreement with it.
Right, yeah.
We just like, hold on, now this is going too far, right? But we powerless to do anything about it because we don't have our own schools. Most of us
don't have our own schools, yeah.
And if you do got your own schools, most of the time, if it's sanctioned by the state, you got a certain curriculum that you have to deal.
Right. You can't you gotta abide by certain things. You can't teach certain things. You can't have certain books. They banning books in schools right now,
Listen, let me tell you
because
something.
certain books they
Yeah,
say are controversial or something, but it's history. It's the truth.
listen, man. The thing is this: when you're talking about a nation, when you're talking about being free, you got to think about this. The United States of America is 200 and let me see, 775. So what's this year? 23. So it's almost 250 years old. 2025 about be about 250 years old, right? From 1775, 1776. I think they count from 75.
Right.
Declaration of Independence, 1776. People talk about 76. So we can say, but we roughly 250 years old, right? When you think about something that has to last, let's just say 200 years, 250 years, right? A nation, a government. How, and we understand that most of us ain't about to be living for no 100, 250 years, right? So how do you
Right.
make something last for 200 years, right? The first thing most free people and people who are going to be free and self-determined, the first thing they have to do, and something that's going to last in perpetuity, the first thing they have to do is get control of their education and their children's education, because your children are going to be this is your future. So how you raise your children, how you the values that you institute into your society, and what you allow and what you don't allow is going to be dependent on how long your nation is going to last. This is about 250 years old. You got other nations around the planet, they may be 100 plus years old. Some of them young, especially a lot of the ones that just got their independence over there in Africa. Then you got old civilizations like in China, where they can trace their stuff 5,000 years, and better. Then you got ancient civilizations. But when you think about, we need to make something last for 200 years, we need to make something last for 1,000 years. How do we do that? And one of the things that the Most High Elijah Muhammad taught us, the first thing when Allah, who appeared in the person Master Prophet Muhammad, to who all praises is due forever, one of the first things he instructed the original laborers to do was to take our children out of school, because you can't build a nation if you don't have control of your children's education. You got to take them out of the school, and you have to control your education, because if you're going to build something that's going to last generations, the first and the minister teaches us, he said the first thing he built, the first thing when he built, he didn't build a school. He didn't build, not a school. He didn't build a church or a mosque, or he didn't build a hospital, or he didn't build a business. He said the first institution that was set up was the school. Because if I'm gonna build a nation, and this thing's got to last hundreds of years, then the people, I have to have an institution where I teach the values that are gonna carry us into the future. I have to teach I have to teach the values that are gonna last forever. You got to think about it like this. You think about uh like these white folks in the South, right? And they turn down a lot of their Civil War generals' statues. They bring them Confederate flags down. They changing the names of the streets, and you look at a lot of these white folks, and they up in arms. And they real upset about that. Why you think they upset? It ain't because uh,
Because that's
uh,
what they use to educate.
it's their history, man.
Yeah, that's the yeah.
They understand things like this. Mossam Elijah Muhammad, he talks about history being the subject most qualified to reward the research. And he also teaches on history bringing the spring motives of any people. Because if I'm making something last for 200 some years, 1,000 years, why do you think you go to college today, right? And you're gonna read a lot of this. If you study Western civilization,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
this is thousands of years old, over 2,000 years old. Why is it still relevant? Because if in order for my civilization to last, I need to continue to teach the future generations what this thing is built on, what made us strong, what made us powerful, what's going to keep us in power. It's one thing to build something, but it's a totally different thing to maintain it. So how are we gonna maintain this thing?
Right.
How are we
Yeah.
gonna maintain it past us? We're gonna have to teach a certain value system, a certain curriculum, and we're gonna have to teach certain things to make the legacy last. People talk about generational wealth and legacy and all of that stuff,
You start
and
with the
we think it's
education.
tied up in money. Oh man, it's tied up in the value system you pass down. It's tied up in the education. It's tied up in what is going to last in perpetuity. And you have to teach principles that's universal. And you have to teach principles that's going to last forever. Universal principles, natural law. You know, a lot of these things, you know, these are things you're dealing with natural law. This is another one right here. This is if you want to understand the fun, you know, the Bible talks
The
about this,
Kabbalion.
the Kabbalion, the Bible says like this: wisdom rests on seven pillars. You know. Anyway, showing y'all all my books, because you have to understand what is all this thing built on. You know, when you're dealing with like senators, when you're dealing with senators, when you're dealing with politicians, and particularly people that run governments, run the countries and stuff like that, you know, you'll notice that most of their education and stuff like that is like in law and in history. Because if we land down certain policies that have to last 50 or 100 years, what policy are we going to lay down? And how do we understand this in terms of in terms of what happened in the past? You know, how do we not repeat either the same mistakes, or when we viewing a thing, how can we see this properly? You know, because you know, minister teaches that, you know, gifts of prophecy can actually be attained by the study of history, because everything
Right.
is cyclical. It
Right.
keeps
Yeah.
round and
Yep.
round
Over and over again.
and round. This stuff don't be new, man. It don't be new. And so what we seeing now is not new, but most of us, so many of us are disarmed with a level of historical knowledge that we don't know what we should even do. We don't know what we should be moving, what we should be doing, and what, you know, we don't know the time. We don't know what must be done. So we so reactionary to everything. Oh man, this is happening. Let's do this. Like, you know, problem, reaction, solution. You know, as they say, Hegelian Hegelian dialect. Hey,
Yep.
hey man, this stuff be worked on us again and again and
Just
again
over and over,
and
over
again.
and over.
And like we just be in this loop, right? And we just constantly looking toward the enemy, like, what should we do? like we like, what should we do? What should we do? And they say, oh, well, you got to do it like this and do this and do this. And they get most of our leaders, misleaders,
Yeah. Yep.
to
The
to sell
leaders.
us this idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is what we should do, and we end up right back in the same position. It's just like, okay,
Man, I look. That's why I kind of brought that up in a way, because I see it happening all over again. Like with the war on drugs. I see the same thing with this music. Because as you can see, a lot of these big name rappers, they're getting indicted on drug charges and everything, and it's like another mass incarceration, another wave of mass incarceration. You see them in the media, you see them all being demonized, so them waving guns on social media and everything. Basically, it's basically like the same blueprint of mass incarceration. I mean, the war on drugs, and it's happening right now.
man, listen, I mean, you absolutely right, man. And you know, it's just, man, we don't be seeing it, man. You know, I mean, we just, and but you know, it really ain't our fault, because like I mean, it is, but it ain't. You know, because it's really gonna always be your fault at the end of the day. But you know, when you like, when you ain't never had no time to really look at this thing for real for what it is, it's kind of, you don't know what to do. And you go, and this society, man, it keeps people in such a state of problems. throwing things at you because you're constantly reactionary. If you ever play any type of chess, they teach you that, as long as you constantly got somebody on the defensive,
Right. Yeah.
they can never even put a strategy together to begin to go on the offensive and to begin to put you in check. As long
Right.
as you constantly keeping somebody in check, check, and like, oh, let me move out the way. I mean, it's that's what it is, man. And we don't look at it from them terms. And since we don't think like that, and we don't look at it from them terms, we constantly, you know, and they always got this controlled opposition that gonna come across the television screen, across social media, that we've like been blindly trusting. And the thing is, and this is the thing, we only trust this element of our people, and we only, well, I ain't gonna even say our people, we only trust this government in so much that they're able to provide food, clothing, shelter, safety, security, and like jobs for us. The minute they can't provide for us, is the minute a lot of us are going to begin to shake our head and say, you know what, I think I need to be trying to look at something else and begin some other plan. And that's scriptural too. That's wrapped up in the scriptures, the Bible and Quran and the prophecies, man. Well, yeah, we'll come back, man. We'll do this again,
Yeah,
man.
yeah, yeah. We definitely got to do a part two to this. We were supposed to be talking about your business and everything, and
Well, I
supporting
mean, because,
project.
yeah,
And
I mean, because you, once you begin to understand certain things, you have to understand. Okay, you have to be moving in another direction. You got to move in another direction, and you got to be moving in multiple directions. You just because I mean, hey, you can start a business, you can begin to get yourself to be independent, but that's only like a small example of what needs to
right,
be
right,
done.
right.
It's
Yeah,
one
yeah.
example, and it ain't easy. It can be difficult for a lot of different reasons. But that's it, man. But yeah, man. Let's I don't know, man. Let's see if we can convene next Friday, man, around about the same time, bro.
Okay, yeah, yeah. We can most
Let me
definitely
see.
do
Will I
that.
be off? Hold on for a minute. Hold on. My schedule switches up. Let me see. My schedule switches up this week. No, 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 no. My schedule gonna switch up. So next Friday I won't be off. No, I won't be off next Friday, but I'll have off days and we'll
Y-
schedule it.
Yeah, yeah. Just whenever you have time again, and before you get off, I want to shout out like your business and everything. So go check his food truck out.
Okay, man.
Sydney and Solomon Dogs. We got all type of good stuff there. I know they got fish there now. They got grilled Polishes, hot dogs, Italian beefs. Over there in Carbondale. Also, be on the lookout for the Soldier Project. That's a non for profit they got going on. As far as like children outreach and everything. So go check that out.
Yeah, we Jerry was working with one of our kids today, man. Like we always trying to find something to do, man. And because at the end of the day, man, you gotta build a community around what you're doing because you can do some, I can do some, and when it's one or two of y'all can do some, but nations aren't built by individuals. They built by communities. They built by families and communities and all of that. So we have to begin to think in terms like that. But yeah, man, let me get to Walmart before it closed, man. 'Cause I don't.
Alrighty then, and then Jerry, she just commented the names and everything. And what I'll do, I'll put your websites and everything under the video playback so people will be able to check that out. So man, yeah, yeah. Thank you for coming up here with us today though.
Let me see. I think your mom say coffee break in the middle of the live.
Yeah.
All right, bro. We'll talk, man. We'll talk next week and show up.
Alrighty.
All right, bro. Peace.
Peace. But yeah, y'all, as y'all seen, we had a great discussion tonight. There's more to come. Also, go check out my other interview as well. With the CEO of Kyla.io, Jared Arms. That was a real great interview as well. There's more content coming soon. I got some more people in line to interview as well. So we come on here, we have good conversation. So just come to the channel, come check us out. The Story Told. Give us a like, subscribe, and as far as like if you want any information about like any of the other people I interview, just look under the description. All their websites and everything will be under the description link. So y'all have a good night. Peace.